and welcome viewers. I'm Pia and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to pause dual import fees that has disrupted trade. Trump's port fees aimed at rebuilding US shipment and maritime logistics. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has stated that Asia-Pacific region is set at a critical inflection point with a rapidly changing global economic order as he's chaired the APEC Summit in Gyeongju. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to hold first set of talks with Japan's new Prime Minister Takeichi and Canadian leader Mark Carney as he seeks to restart engagement with China. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te has slammed China, stating that Taiwan refuses China's one country, two systems policy. Has also stated that Taiwan will resort to defend its freedom and democracy. Indian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has denounced US's nuclear testing announcement, stating that it is regressive and irresponsible and a serious threat to international peace and security. Israel has received the bodies of two deceased hostages as part of the truce deal. The identities of the hostages have been confirmed as Amiram Cooper and Shahar Baruch. The Turkish Foreign Ministry has stated that Pakistan and Afghanistan have agreed to extend a ceasefire for at least another week as both sides plan to meet at a higher level gathering in Istanbul again. Hurricane Melissa has confirmed death toll has climbed to 49 with at least 30 dead in Haiti and 19 in Jamaica. Forecasters estimate up to $52 billion in damages. Well, viewers, those were the headlines and our top focus. The United States and China have agreed to pause tit-for-tat fees on each other's ships that had become a major irritant in the broader trade war between the world's two largest economies and pushed up ocean freight costs. Now, this agreement is amongst the key trade deals reached in South Korea by US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping during their meeting that took place yesterday. The move provides a 12-month reprieve on an estimated $3.2 billion annually in fees for large Chinese-built vessels sailing to US ports. Remember, earlier this year, the Trump administration announced plans to levy fees on China-linked ships in order to loosen the country's grip on the global maritime industry and bolster the US shipbuilding industry. This was done under Section 301 penalties. It was followed by a US probe that concluded China's domination of global maritime logistics and shipbuilding sectors. This probe concluded that this was driven by unfair practices. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stated now that Section 301 action had been put on hold. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. He is a strategist focusing on the Chinese economy and policies, joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. A very critical bilateral meeting had taken place yesterday. The world's eyes were trained on what exactly Donald Trump and Xi Jinping were discussing, because this trade war between Washington and Beijing has been simmering for quite a while, and it does have global repercussions. What do you think now this pause on the dual import fees would now mean for global supply chains?
Well, this is more than just a trade war between the two superpowers. Is a rivalry for global influence and dominance. And the United States, on the part of the United States, there is a bipartisan, very deep-seated bipartisan consensus that China has proven to be an existential threat to American dominance and hegemony. On the part of China, all China wants is, of course, is the space and to grow its own economy and to become a stronger nation and to reclaim its rightful place in the sun. Now, these two trajectories are obviously causing a lot of frictions on the United States. And that's why the US is pushing back. And on the shipping front, which is, of course, not directly only to trade, because China, over the years, has proven itself to be the world's dominant shipbuilder.
Yes.
Out of perhaps 1,000 ships built per year, China's building 1,000. American is building only about 10. So, and this affects not only the shipping fleet, but also the U.S. Navy. And that's why the Chinese Navy has quickly grown to be the world largest in terms of numbers, though not necessarily in terms of firepower. Nevertheless, because of this meeting, I think President Xi, even at the time of Trump 1.0, foresaw what was coming. And he knew that to negotiate with President Trump, who only believes in strength and power, China needs to grow its own self-reliance on technology and also other countermeasures, and recently has found a very effective countermeasure, a stronghold over the United States' Achilles heel, which of course is the China's dominance in rare earths, which
Yes.
has been built up over the years. Now on the shipping front, so now the Trump administration has agreed to a pause because the shipping charges are on the charge of any Chinese-built ships, regardless of the flag it carries. Provided any Chinese-built ship, even if it carried a foreign flag, if it calls on any American port, it was subject to huge charges. And of course, this would hugely disrupt the global supply chain, is to also hurting Americans' imports and economy as much as the Chinese. And so both sides are calling a pause in
Yes.
exchange for China again suspending the rare earth restrictions for 1 year, depending how the two sides behave in the coming months.
Indeed. And, as we've been discussing for quite a while now, there have been multiple sticking points, the rare earths, whether it's the soybean purchases that China had reduced as well, the advanced computer chips that the United States had restricted from being given to China. Now, all of this seems to have been somewhat sorted. We're looking at a formal framework, of course, being released, but there is a statement by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. It has emphasized that China will suspend its rare earths licensing measures. China will also resume its purchases of American soybeans. Meanwhile, Trump has stated that China may also be allowed to buy advanced computer chips from the United States, particularly from NVIDIA. The Chinese Commerce Ministry has also stated that the United States has agreed to suspend Trump's 24% reciprocal tariff on China for another year. Do you now think that a formalized deal is finally on the anvil?
Well, of course, there's always a formalized deal, one form or another. It depends on whether that deal is final, whether that would resolve all the differences and structural differences between the two superpowers. I think, yes, a formal deal is likely, but it's based on the agreed parameters in the sense that China is now restoring its long established position as the largest customer for the soybeans, because China, even regardless of its size, is an agricultural deficit country in terms of food production and also energy. So it requires importing a lot of food from other countries, and has been buying the soybeans for many, many years. And because of the trade war, it's diverted all the purchases to Brazil and Russia. So China is merely restoring its former position and suspending the rare earths restrictions for 1 year, depending what the Trump administration's further developments. So No, I think that's understandable.
Indeed, sir. Requesting you to stay on with us as we track further updates. More updates coming in from the APEC Summit itself. Chinese President Xi Jinping has stressed that multilateral trade regime must be safeguarded. He's called for joint efforts to protect the multilateral trading system, to build an open regional economic environment and maintain the stability of industrial supply chains. President Xi has also called on to promote the digitalization and greening of trade while advancing universally beneficial and inclusive development. President Xi has made the call when he presented a 5-point proposal for building universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization in his speech at the 2025 APEC Economic Leaders meeting in Gyeongju. Meanwhile, there is a statement that's come in from China's top trade negotiator, where he emphasized that Beijing would establish multilateral and bilateral cooperation platforms and dialogue mechanisms for green and low-carbon development as well. He's added that China will actively cultivate green emerging industries and international cooperation in clean energy and the circular economy as well. In fact, speaking on rare earth export controls, Beijing has in fact maintained that maintaining a good grasp of security enables a better development environment. China's statement on multilateralism, of course, comes at a time when it has consistently voiced oppositions to the tariffs imposed by the United States and has now been successful in lowering this threshold after the meeting between President Xi Jinping and US President Donald Trump at the sidelines of the APEC Summit. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Interesting statement by Xi Jinping. He's of course called for multilateralism, global supply chains to be maintained, their robustness to be maintained specifically. This comes in light, of course, of the more protectionist stance that Washington is applying. We've seen another statement from South Korean President Lee Jae-myung that had echoed such similar sentiments. What do you make of this?
Well, this is a subtle riposte. R-I-P-O-S-T-E, riposte to Donald Trump's unilateralism and also casting the rule-based, trading rule-based order to the wind on the altar of American first coercion. And of course, the rule-based order was actually led by the United States after the Second World War, when the United States was a benign hegemon. It's also mindful of other countries' interests, but also under the overall umbrella of American hegemony, which remained unchallenged for a long, long time until recently. And so President Trump is not abandoning almost entirely the so-called rule-based system in favor of American first, and using coercive and also aggressive tactics to bend other countries to the will of the United States. So I think that this is a subtle riposte to this kind of rhetoric and creating a more inclusive and more multilateral world. I think this riposte, of course, is receiving a great deal of positive reception from countries in the global south or even America's traditional allies, which are also suffering from this destruction of the old rule-based trading order.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking our time sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World today. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus to more news coming in. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te has now issued a statement rejecting China's one country, two systems plan and has vowed to uphold Taiwan's freedom, democracy and right to self-defense. This was done while attending a ceremony for the commissioning of Taiwan's first M1A280 Abrams tanks. Now, speaking at a military base in Hukou, he stressed that Taiwan maintains the status quo with dignity and resolve. He's further stated that any forceful unification and aggression would be firmly opposed by Taiwan. Lai has asserted that Taiwan's sovereignty can only be decided by the Taiwanese people and not China. This has come after China declared that it does not rule out the use of force taking over Taiwan. Lai has also pledged, meanwhile, to increase military spending to 5% of the country's GDP by 2030 in order to strengthen its defenses. With us on the broadcast is Hidekazu Sakai, Associate Professor of Kansai Gaidai University in Japan, joining us from Tokyo. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. Of course, all eyes were on the Donald Trump-Xi Jinping meeting yesterday, but we've been seeing over the last couple of days Taiwanese leaders express apprehensions as well as to what exactly will be discussed. Would this be raked up? And also reaffirming their support for the United States of America. Considering the posture that China has adopted in the South China Sea, especially with regards to Taiwan and numerous of its fighter jets and its ships crossing the median line as well in recent times. Where do you see this headed? There are some experts who say that China is preparing to invade Taiwan. Do you think this is possible in the near future?
Well, this is always unclear issue. Taiwan has been center of the China's national interest for many, many years, since its foundation in 1949. Therefore, Taiwan issue is always biggest issues for both the United States and China. And I'd like to point it out also, this is a huge issue to Japan as well. Therefore, I think everybody, including Japan, have been sort of paying attention if China and the United States talk about Taiwan at this point, but they did not. Doesn't mean the United States abandoned Taiwan or China gave up Taiwan. Taiwan is right there always. Therefore, I think Taiwan wanted to send a clear message that we are here and don't forget us. And this is Taiwan's the status quo that we do not want unification with China, but we don't want to have a war either. So they want to maintain a middle ground that they want to continue as before. So this is a very touchy and very sensitive, but nobody wants war, actually, that's for sure. China doesn't want a war either. Therefore, this is something sort of an adjustment. That's my understanding.
Indeed, so I request you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very critical developments. We're now learning that South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has held his first summit with newly elected Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takeichi on the sidelines of the APEC leaders' meeting. The 41-minute talk between the leaders focused on strengthening cooperation between the two nations while keeping sensitive historical disputes at bay. South Korean leader Lee Jae-myung stressed on the importance of collaboration on both domestic and international issues. Meanwhile, Takeichi has described the countries as neighboring friendly countries that are important to each other and has hoped for closer cooperation. Both leaders agreed to maintain dialogue and have planned another meeting to further the talks. The summit signals a potential shift towards smoother Japan-South Korea relations. However, the future, of course, depends on the handling of historical issues sensitive to both sides. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Hidekazu Sakai. We're seeing that Japan and South Korea, both countries, yes, they have their historical sensibilities that they have to account for, but in the present scenario, there is a geopolitical reality of tensions simmering between Washington and Beijing. South Korea and Japan both are allies of the United States of America, but cannot ignore their geopolitical reality, the geographic proximity to China. How do you think then both countries are sort of balancing this in today's geopolitically charged atmosphere?
Okay. In order to understand South Korea's political stance changes, is that its own geopolitical position of South Korea. For South Korea, China is always right there, and they have a long history. You know, they were subjugated to the China for a long time. But same time, Korea has a fresh memory of being colonized by Japan about a couple of decades in the 20th century. Therefore, for the South Korea, China and Japan are sort of eternal sort of threat, but at the same time they have to deal with it. So this is their political first issues. And at this point, South Korea and China relationship has been, I would say, very unfavorable to South Korea in terms of trade relations and strategic position as well. And Japan always have wanted to have wanted to work with South Korea, but we have so many issues like I don't know, Takeshima, and also comfort movement issues and other things. We had so many historical issues, and Japan thought we apologize, but South Korea doesn't think that Japan's apologize. So they have always sort of kind of what do you call it? They never really agreed what they have done, but this time. Really, government doesn't have a choice that they have to work with Japan because, as I said, South Korea's relationship with China has been worsened. And also, I'm sure that South Korea has been pressured by the United States that, South Korea needs to work with Japan. Otherwise, the United States cannot help you. So I'm sure that the United States pressures were right there. So I believe at this point, South Korea, Japan, and the U.S., this trilateral relations has been kind of getting better. And I'm sure that China doesn't like this sort of containment of China. These are a kind of sequential schedule of Takaichi's summit meeting today with China and yesterday with South Korea was not a coincidence, but it was a plan. Therefore, South Korea and Japan and the United States have been kind of making agreement that we should work together to balance against China.
Indeed, you've referred to the meeting that is going to take place between Xi Jinping and Takaichi today itself. What are your expectations from this meeting?
Well, China has been very cautious about Takaichi's emergence as a prime minister. I'm sure that they have a lot of homework on her, and they're so cautious because the Takaichi has been protege of late Prime Minister Abe. And I remember that when Abe became prime minister, China was so cautious, and even Xi Jinping didn't smile when he met Abe for the first time. And then, but then, interestingly, China and Japan relations became very good. And yes, China has viewed Takaichi as a hardliner, but doesn't mean China-Japan relationship will be worsened. Maybe China realized that it needs to be careful to work with Japan, and therefore, in this case, Japan can, sort of become more vocal about a lot of problem with China that they can negotiate. Otherwise, Japan and China, their relations will just keep getting worsened. But I think Xi Jinping's and Takaichi Sanai's meeting will be successful.
All right, so with that, I would like to thank you for taking out time sharing your analysis with us on NewsX World today. With that, viewers, we're shifting our focus to what's taking place in Indonesia. Indonesia is still weighing its options on buying China's J-10 fighter jets. Jakarta's defense ministry says that the plan is still under review and no final decision has been made yet. Officials say that they're analyzing all available platforms to strengthen Indonesia's air defense and protect its sovereignty. Earlier this month, reports quoted Defense Minister Jeffrey Jamsuddin stating that the J-10s will be flying in Jakarta shortly. But he later clarified that the final call lies with President Prabowo Subianto, who's not yet made a decision. Experts say that the Chinese J-10s are cheaper than Western models but could complicate Indonesia's military operations and interoperability with other forces. The J-10, developed by Chengdu Aircraft Corporation, is China's 4.5 generation fighter jet and one of its key defense exports. More news coming in. China's Manned Space Agency has stated that the Shenzhou 21 crewed spaceship is scheduled to be launched later today from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. The spokesperson for CMSA noted that this mission marks the 6th crewed flight during the application and development phase of China's space station and the 37th flight mission of the country's manned space program. The main objectives of the mission are to complete an in-orbit crew rotation with the Shenzhou 20 crew, stay aboard the space station for about 6 months and carry out space science and application tasks. This will be the first time China conducts an in-orbit space experiment involving rodent mammals. 4 mice, 2 male and 2 female, will travel with the spacecraft and be raised in orbit. The experiment aims to study how microgravity and confined space environment affect mice behavior patterns. The Shenzhou 21 crew consists of 3 astronauts representing different specializations: pilot, a fighter engineer, and a payload specialist. Zhang Liu, the spacecraft pilot, is the mission commander and will be returning to space after 2 years. Wu Fei and Zhang Hongzhang will be on their maiden space flight, with Wu Fei said to become the youngest Chinese astronaut to participate in a space mission to date. That's a wrap on the China report. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.